everybody. Yeah, it's so great to hear from so many folks that are working within the communities out here in the west part of the state. The organization has gone far in the eastern part of the state where I'm from. I live in the very northeast corner of Johnson County. I've been in Overland Park now for over 25 years. And I chose to move to Kansas from California many, many years ago because it felt like home. It felt like home to me. I have a career as an executive assistant for 16 years, so I've kind of lived my life for service, as it were. And now I own my own small business, just in real estate, doing my own thing, but have kept my finger involved, kept my hand involved in politics ever since 2016. It was really 2013 that kind of got me kicked into things with Brownback and seeing what was happening across the state. Now, I don't have any children, but I saw what was happening to the schools across the state with his experiment that he had going on with taxes, and it scared me because even though I don't have kids in school, those kids are being educated to take care of me later on in life.
Yes.
Those kids are going to be our doctors, they're going to be our lawyers, they're going to be our teachers, right? So it's under everybody's interest to stay interested in education staying properly funded. Now, I was elected as a Kansas House rep in 2020 after several years of being involved, but I first became a precinct committee woman in 2019. Started attending League of Women Voters events in 2017 to hear from my legislative representatives. Real fortunate to have a great chapter of the League of Women Voters in Johnson County that puts those events on. And I will say at this point in time, and even in 2017, it's mostly Dems that are showing up at those. The Republicans are not wanting to come and talk to us for some reason, which is disappointing because we're just asking questions about what they're doing at the state legislature. And I think that those should be easy questions to answer personally. But when I go out and I attend these demonstrations, the protests, I carry a sign that's kind of similar to this that says, ask me what you can do to help make change happen. I'm not really interested in attacking anybody or anything. I want to know what people are thinking they can do to make that change happen. One of the ways that I've gotten involved in making change happen is I love to volunteer to work elections. Now, how many of us have worked elections in your county as a poll worker? I love it. The first one I did was in 2018, and I fell in love immediately. It was a really tough day. It was the general in 2018, and we had a lot of voters coming through, and a specific script that we needed to use to show people, because we use machines in Johnson County. Wanted to make sure that people knew what they were doing at that machine to make sure that their ballot was being processed properly. Since then, I've continued to work. There's only been 2 elections that I've missed. One was because I had a fever in 2020 for the primary, and I felt it was probably a bad idea for me to go and work that election. And then in 2023, my older sister passed away unexpectedly the day before the primary election, and so I had to fly to California instead. And every other election I've worked. I'm now a supervising judge on election day, and I work advanced voting as well in Johnson County. And I think that the reason why I do it is not only just because I love seeing all the voters coming through, but I love to help them in that voting process. I remember in 2022, there was a gentleman who came in, he had a real scowl on his face as we were trying to work through the machines. It was a very small room, had a lot of voters coming through, and so he was waiting at the door, and he had this look on his face, and just wanted, and I said, how are you doing today? What's going on? He said, I don't know how I feel about these machines. I said, well, you can vote on paper if you'd like to. That's not a problem either. And he just seemed real uncomfortable about things. And I said, have you considered volunteering to work an election? Because you learn the process. You learn how, we have to go through training before every election. This year I'll go through that training here in the next couple of weeks before the election in November. And you know what? He said, I hadn't thought about that. I might just do that. If you've got the time, you've got a couple of days, one day for training, and then the day to actually work on election day. You get paid to do it, and I think it's a real rewarding day. It's a long day, but it's a real rewarding day to do. And that guy walked out of there with a smile on his face. He had a real good voting experience that day, and it was a tough day. That 22 election was a really tough one, though. But this process has helped me understand that we have safe, secure elections in Kansas. And I'd love to hear from a lot of you after we're done here today. I'd like to hear how you vote, what the voting process is here in Thomas County and in the other counties around here, because that's really interesting to me. It's different across the state. Even in Douglas County, I just realized recently, you guys vote on paper.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And again, that is something that you can do in Johnson County. It's absolutely everybody's right to do that. A lot of people choose to vote by mail. But we have our machines that also mark the ballots for you. And then at the end, after you're finished, you put it into another machine that does the counting process. And in 2022, although I thought it was kind of silly, we did have a recount that occurred that helped prove just how accurate that machine counting is across the state. So I think it was in 3 or 4 different counties that they did the recount in, and showed that it's a process that works. And again, the safety, the security is already built in. And what's happening in the legislature is that we are looking, this is so often what's happening, they're looking to create problems so that they can create solutions for them. That we already have the solutions, they're there. So to me it seems like a waste of time and money, but this is what people do, right? So we've got those who spin those election conspiracies out there. They're out of touch with what's happening across the state of Kansas, I think. And while voting can be scary, those conspiracies really don't help comfort voters. And so that's something that I just want to work to fight against. So we were talking about this at my table during lunch here, and I think I've just got a couple more minutes. Hopefully I'm not going to go over time here. How challenging it can be to discuss voting or politics in rural communities with our families, with our friends. And especially, who's on the ballot that is interested in helping their neighbors versus furthering agendas that are pushed by think tanks run out of Washington, D.C. It's so important for us to have those conversations with each other, as uncomfortable as they may be sometimes. And what it takes is listening, right? That's something that I do as a precinct committee woman. I go to the door, and if they answer, God bless them, you get someone at the door, and I like to say, how are things going? What's happening here for you, right? And then we just have a conversation. I'm there literally to tell people, here's what's going to be on your ballot. I'd like for you to do the research ahead of time. Make sure you know who you're voting for. And what's your plan to go and vote? Are you going to vote in advance? Are you going to be voting by mail? Are you going to vote on election day right around the corner from us here? What is the plan? And then I like to end that by saying, now make sure you talk to your friends and neighbors about that, here and across the state of Kansas, to make sure they have a plan to go and vote too. Because this year, we're going to have probably about a 28, if we're lucky, % turnout in our municipal elections across the state. And that is really unfortunate. Those are the people who are deciding what's happening to our roads, and how our schools are, taking to school boards, They're dealing with the nitty gritty, right? They're dealing with the taxes that are happening in your county. So I just want to remind folks that engagement, the engagement that what we've been talking about here, whether it's with the party level, with your neighbors, that engagement fosters change, okay? And we are clearly at one of those turning points in history where change is occurring. So I think we should try to stay engaged. This is the way that I've chosen to stay engaged in my life. I am considering a run for Secretary of State. Right now it will be against Pat Proctor. I think it's probably be in that one, although there is a primary in that race. And I know Pat. I have communicated with Pat. Pat has never worked an election. Pat doesn't seem to have an interest in working an election, which I think is a really great way to connect with your community. And it's unfortunate that he's chosen not to do that, even though in 2021, as a legislator, I stood up at the podium, I stood at the well. It was one of my final speeches that I gave there, and I said, you're not running for re-election this year. It's 2021, you're gonna be working, it's a municipal election. Go back and work volunteer to work an election in your county so that you can see how great our elections are run in the state of Kansas, across all those communities, and to see how it's run. And so I asked Pat if he'd taken me up on that, and he said no. To his credit, he did respond to my emails at least, so I'll give him that much. So I'm looking forward to chatting with more of you here today. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to approach me. But again, remember that engagement is what's fostering change. And however you're doing it, try to do it calmly. Try to do it with your listening ears on. And thank you so much for all being here. It really does make a big difference. This community is important. So thank you for having me.